I would like to explain what, in my opinion, is typography and why it is important. And to make that really epic, I would like to go back to the Stone Age. And I would like to do that with a movie by Werner Herzog, German movie maker. And it's about a cave that was discovered 1994 by 3 French explorers. And it features the oldest paintings by mankind. So here is a small scene from the movie.
At first, the cave did not appear to contain anything special, aside from being particularly beautiful. But then, deep inside, they found this. It would turn out that this cave was pristine. It had been perfectly sealed for tens of thousands of years. It contained by far the oldest cave paintings, dating back some 32,000 years. In fact, they are the oldest paintings ever discovered, more than twice as old as any other.
So, what really fascinates me about this movie is that it shows very, very, very old paintings by humans. And in my opinion, we as humans, we have this urge to visualize our own feelings and our history and what we are experiencing on a daily basis. And the origins of painting something on a cave wall really come from that urge to visualize your own daily surroundings. And from those paintings, typography also stems. There's, for example, this thing that is an ox head. And from the head of that ox, gradually, letters developed. So you had a development from a painting that got gradually abstracted and in the end turned into our letter A. You can see it went through a lot of different cultures that were using that visual. And nowadays for us, typography plays a really important role. All of us, once we get introduced in an educational system, when we go to attend to school, we have to access all our history and all our knowledge. And we usually do so by learning how to read and how to write. And in my opinion, the act of reading and writing is the first time where you get in touch with design. Before that, if you were drawing or you were painting, that is not really design. But designing your own handwriting is a personal approach to a design, to do a design. Here you can see my own handwriting, roughly at the age of 10. Before I traveled here, I looked up some old folders. And if you go closer, you can see that this handwriting looks really childish. It is also a reflection of my former 10-year-old self. Please also note that even the title is misspelled if any one of you can speak German. And here we have a brief extract from notes I made while preparing this presentation. You can see that the design of my handwriting gradually changed over time, and it is now more a reflection of my own personality. What I find interesting about that is that each and all of us, or most of us, we do have our own handwriting, and our own handwriting is a direct representation of our personality. There's a branch of science that deals with the topic of how handwriting is reflecting one's personality. It's called graphology. Graphology is the analysis of handwriting. For example, apparently, if you're drawing an F like this, you are you have a preponderance of intellectual and spiritual interest. There's various studies that deal with the subject of understanding handwriting and how it is a reflection of our personality. And I would say it is when handwriting is a reflection of our personality, it also has an influence on how we perceive the world and how we are able to articulate the world visually. This is very complicated, but I will explain to you in detail. And I will explain so by a little history from my own life. So about 3 years ago, I had this studio in Zurich, Switzerland. Zurich is the biggest city in Switzerland, and it's also where most of the designers end up. And while I was a student, I always had the dream to have a cool design studio in that city. And 3 years ago, I achieved my goal. I had a really nice studio. I had this nice designer furniture. I had interns. I had even one of the best espresso machines in Zurich. And at that point, I realized that I'm not interested in having all that stuff anymore. It was just the goal that kept me going. And I decided I need to have a really drastic change in my life. So I gave up my apartment, I gave up my studio, and I booked a one-way ticket to Tokyo, Japan. And the reason for doing so, first of all, of course, I really love Japanese women. You will probably never see me as happy as on this picture. And I wanted to go there because I was really interested in their design and in their approach of design. Because I couldn't understand Japanese, I cannot read it, I cannot write it, and I cannot understand it. And after some complications, I ended up in this house. This is an artist and designer community in the middle of Tokyo. And it is also a co-working space where I stayed for a long time and kept working. We have every Tuesday really cool rooftop parties. And it was in this studio where I met Mami Sensei. Now, Mami Sensei is a calligraphy master. She was studying the art of calligraphy since she is 9 years old. And I took calligraphy classes with her every Saturday morning. And the problem was that the calligraphy classes were always on Saturday morning, which meant I was always super hungover and kind of tried to slip by. And I really remember the first lesson I ever took in calligraphy. And the first lesson in calligraphy is you're learning to write the character, the Chinese character for eternity, because this character contains the most different important strokes you need to master to do Japanese calligraphy. And this is how Mami-san taught that to me.
Okay?
Okay.
あ、なんか緊張するな。
And I want you to pay attention to the strokes she does, especially in the end. This one here.
よし。
This simple stroke for me was really fascinating. I will repeat it here. This was really interesting for me because she's taking a straight stroke and in the end she changes the direction of the brush to terminate the stroke. And it was a few days later when I went to the Japanese Samurai Sword Museum in Tokyo. And what I discovered there was really fascinating because if you look at the tip of the blade of a Japanese samurai sword, you can see the same thing. The blade goes just straight and then in the end it has an abrupt change of direction. And in my opinion, the reason to design a sword in that way has to do something with the way you're learning how to do typography. It influences your perception of design. And I went a bit on to make some comparisons between the two cultures, East and West. It's very simplified, but you can see on the right-hand side, the European broadsword, and on the left side, the Japanese samurai sword. Now, the shape of the European broadsword is just one straight line, whereas the whole samurai sword is more curved, like a brush stroke. And if you look at the helmet of the knight, you have the European knight, the knight's helmet that is just consisting of very straight and geometric shapes, whereas the Japanese samurai helmet is just a combination of very complicated curves. You can even see on this thing up here that you have the same terminal stroke and curve. And this thing, if you look at this culture, goes on and on. You have the castles, where on the roofs you have a slight curve and then a terminal. Or if you compare an altar and a shrine, or you compare a church and a temple. So always the Western object of design has a very different language than the Eastern object of design. And in my opinion, it is also, to a certain extent, a result of how you perceive the world through your own handwriting. So whereas this design resembles this typography, this typography resembles this design. And the point I would like to make here, which you will also see later in my lecture, is that typography always exists in a context of other designs or in a culture. It is both influencing and determining a culture. So this letter is connected to this culture or visual universe, whereas this letter is connected to this culture. And to give you a little insight in the work of my calligraphy teacher, Mami Sensei, I will show you a brief clip of her working in Tokyo. Now I would like to change a bit the topic. You will see a lot of things that are connected to what I just said later in the lecture, and I would like to talk a bit about myself. I'm from Switzerland, and I always wanted to go to art school. In fact, when I was in elementary school and later in high school and so on, I was always a bit bothered by going to school. I didn't really like it because with a lot of things I learned in school, there usually was always a problem to solve, and then there was only one correct way or answer to solve that problem. And when I went to art school, it really opened my eyes, because for everything to do, there was an endless amount of possibilities. And I decided later on to study graphic design, and I was confronted with having to use typefaces and typography for my own designs. And I remember that for me it was very complicated, because at that time I didn't know anything about typefaces and typography. So I got really curious, and I thought the only way to really understand that is to just design typefaces and typography myself. And I had 2 teachers that I talked to about this, and one teacher told me, don't do it, it's too complicated. Don't do it, there's enough good typefaces, impossible, don't do it. And the other teacher told me, don't do it, because you will never get paid for doing so. So, of course, that really motivated me. And with a friend in art school, we decided we're going to sell typefaces or design typefaces and put them online or find people that will get them and buy them. And this is the flyer for the party of our apartment. We also live together. And back in that time, I really wanted to publish my own things. So I designed books, I designed typefaces, I designed posters, but I didn't have an audience to sell them, and I didn't have money to produce them. So I thought to myself, well, you're young and you desperately need money. What do you do? And of course I did what everyone else would do in the same situation. I sold my own body. So we decided, let's just pose nude or semi-nude for a calendar and then sell that calendar to people to raise money to found our own company or our own project. So in art school there were a lot of really cool people and friends, so we asked a lot of them, and do you want to pose nude for a calendar and we're going to sell it to other people? And because it was art school, a lot of people were like, yeah, let's do it. So I'm really proud to say that this is like the founding piece of my whole existence today. Here we have Mr. January. This guy was really into hockey. Then February is more like space themed. He's a good friend of mine. He studied literature and writing. Very philosophical guy. This guy even brought some Swiss Army equipment to the shoot. Those dudes, I don't even know what to say. Here we have my good friend and business partner. He was a bit shy. And of course, for December, myself. Because my name actually means Christmas in French, yeah. And with the money we made from that, we decided to found our own platform, Grilli and Grilli Type, and we went to a lot of art shows and art fairs and sold our books and posters and typefaces and everything to other people. And those are some impressions of how that teamwork looked. And of course, later, we turned into like a real business. I noticed that when we had our own floor mat with our logo on it. If you come to the office and you step on your own logo, you know that you made it, kind of. And okay, here are some slides where I'm boasting about what I'm doing, so I will keep it brief. We recently worked with Google. We provided them the typeface for their new self-driving car. We also provided the typeface for Olympic game bid for Norway for 2022. We also provided the typeface for the university at Austin in Texas. They even carved it in stone. I really like that. Then we have beer with our typefaces, Pitchfork music platform, and so on and so forth, and YouTube, and the girls magazine from Korea and Hong Kong. And if you want to know more, I will give you the link to our website, and you might have a look on your own. And about myself, I'm not only running this platform Grilli Type, I'm also traveling a lot, and I'm lecturing all over the world. This is a workshop I made in Korea last year. It was about stealing and copying from other people. Here, of course, this is stolen from Russian constructivist movement. I was this year also in Cairo. You can notice that I always pick the pictures where I look kind of cool. I was also last year in Vladivostok. Here I'm really proud of this because it's the two monks that developed the Cyrillic typeface. This was the exhibition in Vladivostok. I also was at the National Women's Day in China to have a lecture, and in Japan. And to explain you a bit what I'm doing, I have to briefly mention that, again, I'm from Switzerland, and in Switzerland we have this long tradition of Swiss modernism, movement in graphic design that tried to have maximal impact with minimal design. So it's a very minimalist movement. And if you do graphic design, the minimum you can do is typography. So the graphic design is very much focused on typography. And this letter A is from a typeface that was extensively used by the Swiss modernist movement. It's from a typeface called Akzidenzgrotesque. And I want you to look at this character to understand it a bit better what I'm doing, to look at it as if it was a sculpture. So if I'm looking at this typographic character, I don't only see an A, I also see a sculpture. But it's not a three-dimensional sculpture, it's more kind of a two-dimensional sculpture. So for me, those two things have a lot in common. This typographic character has a very, very nice design. I allowed myself to trash it a bit. So let's say, if you look at this typographic character and you're not such a good designer and you don't make it statically correct, so it tips over, doesn't look so good anymore. Or what happens if you're not a good enough designer to make the sculpture, to bring some harmony in the sculpture? It would look like this. It's not such a good design anymore. What happens if you mess up the proportions? It's not so pleasant anymore. Or what happens if you mess up the dynamic? It's not such a nice sculpture anymore again. The difference between typography and sculpture is that sculpture is usually, apart from being a three-dimensional object, you look at it just isolated. But with typography, you look at it more in a sequence. So not only do the sculptures themselves matter, but also the space between the sculptures is really important. I mean, the black space surrounding them. So if you're putting characters next to one another, they also create the space between them. I mean, all of that space between the letters. Unfortunately, the laser pointer doesn't work. So typography is in a way a sculpture in sequence, and it can consist of just one single character. It can consist of a word. It can consist of a sentence. It can consist of text, and eventually it can also consist of a layout. And in order to do a good typographic design or typeface design, all of those stages, from single character to layout, the typeface needs to work. And how to do that, I will explain you on a practical project we worked on. And before I talk about that project, I drink some water. I want to talk about something very important that I don't want to leave out. And this is the A-team. And the thing that is important that I want to tell you about is, if some of you are here probably also designers, never try as a designer to work alone. Design is always a collaborative effort, and you need to have good people that work with you, or else you will not be a good designer. And I was thinking to myself, what is the best team? And of course, the best team is the A-team, because the A-team consists of the 4 people you need to have in a good team. Is a handsome guy, this one, the strong guy, this one. You need the crazy guy that can also fly helicopters. And to keep it all together, you need the leader. And yeah, here an introduction to the A-team.
If no one else can help, and if you can find them, maybe you can hire the A-team.
So, here is the A-team. Here is my A-team. As you can see, it's the very same thing. Handsome guy, strong guy, crazy guy, the guy that keeps it all together. And together with the A-team, I want to talk to you about this typeface we designed, or basically the strong guy designed it, but we published it all together. And the source of the typeface was this children's book. It's from Estonia, Soviet times Estonia, and it teaches children the alphabet. And our designer came across this book and got really interested in the typeface that is being used in this book, because he couldn't tell what typeface that is. So he scanned a lot of pages from that book and took just the typographic character and scanned them in a high resolution. And from that basis, he started to vectorize a typeface. And because at one point we wanted to find out what this typeface is about, we made a trip with the A-team to Estonia to go to the roots to this typeface. And I couldn't help also to put in this clip in my presentation just because it's cool. So this was Estonia in winter with my Shapka. And in Estonia, there's also a lot of Grilli kiosk, which made us really proud to pose with the A-team. And we went there to the Tallinn Academy of the Arts, and we also went to a lot of antique bookstores to find more books that used the typeface that we were working on. So you can see here a few examples of that typeface being used. Very, very nice design. Very strange, I cannot read it or understand it. But I really loved this like old school style Estonian graphic design. It actually looks also, it's also a very interesting mix between also some Soviet design. And for example, the Pioneer magazine. And we later also found in a coffee shop a Cyrillic version of the same typeface. And so we started to design, to vectorize that typeface. And this is how actually the work of a type designer looks. It's very hard work. You need to stare a lot of those shapes to get them right. You need to get the rhythm right. It needs to look good as a single character, as a word, as a whole text in the layout. It takes a whole lot of coffee to get through all that. And here are some screens of how the daily life as a type designer looks. And once you put in all that hard work, you're left with all those characters. So you designed all of those characters. And then the next step is you want to publicize that design. So how to publish it. And in a way, a typeface is a tool. So I, as a typeface designer, I design a tool for a graphic designer to use in a layout or for text or whatever. And I need to explain the user of my tool how it works, same way I would explain someone how this air conditioner remote control works, or what things a vacuum cleaner consists of. And when we were publishing this typeface, GTSD, we did exactly that, and we did it very extensively. So we really wanted the graphic designer to understand how much detail and thought went in every single typographic character. So this is a manual we usually design for every typeface, just to give an impression on how the typeface works as a tool. But the important thing now is that when you buy a typeface, for me it's a bit similar as if you would buy some clothing. I mean, you're not only buying a piece of clothing because you want to wear it because it's cold or if it's functional or whatever. Clothing and fashion is also an expression of ourselves. And I sometimes with typefaces and publishing typefaces, I miss that a bit because I find it a bit diminishing to reduce the role of a typeface just to the role of being a tool. I think a typeface has its own personality, and this is just a screenshot I took when I googled winter jackets. So it just gives you like some stats from a level of 1 to 10, how water resistant and so on it is, and I found that really boring. If I buy clothing, I'm more interested in things like what is the story behind it or what is the mood. And with fashion you have, for example, fashion photography. These are some examples of a really talented fashion photographer. And this is also about clothing, but it doesn't tell you how water resistant it is or how light it is. It more tries to evoke your own imagination about fashion. And when I'm publishing a typeface, I want to understand the recipient of my design. I want him to understand that typeface as both a tool, but also as a design piece on itself. And I will show you just a brief excursion. It has actually not so much to do with this lecture, but I couldn't resist putting it into it. It's from a documentary about a movie that was never made. And the story was that this filmmaker had a huge vision of a movie he wanted to do. And he thought, what would I do with a movie if money wouldn't play any role? And he came up with this really, really cool movie. He made a storyboard and a script, and he had Mick Jagger that would play the main role, and he would have Pink Floyd doing the music, and he would even have Salvador Dali playing in that movie. For $100,000 per minute, they had to pay him. And in the end, he went with this whole project to a producer, but no one wanted to give him the money. But I found it really fascinating because now there's a documentary movie about him trying to make that movie. And he talks to me, he thinks about movies like I would think about the typeface. And he also tells a story about the importance of money.
This system makes of us slaves without dignity, without debt, no? With a devil in our pocket, this incredible money, in the pocket, this money, this shit, this nothing, this paper who have nothing inside. Movies have heart, boom, 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 have mind, have power, have ambition. I wanted to do something like that. Why not?
So I thought when I watched this, wow, I should do the same thing with my typefaces if I can manage to show people that the typeface has its own personality, its own expression. And to go also back to what I said earlier is that a typeface or a typographic character does not exist without its context. I thought if this character is connected to this visual universe, how can I do the same thing with this typeface we just designed? How can I connect this to this visual universe when I publish the typeface? So, as I showed you in the beginning, the typeface originates from this book about the alphabet. And I thought if I publish this typeface, I should also publish something really colorful. So I started to sketch in my book some imagery about this typeface. I thought it needs to be very friendly, it needs to be very geometric. And the next step was that I thought it needs to have more color. I need to create a universe that is very colorful and friendly and in the spirit. And I also wanted to tell really the story of all the travel we made, how we traveled to Estonia, the origins of all this design. This is my Illustrator template I used for a storyboard. And here you can see some of the resulting movies. This is our trip to Estonia. I'm the guy with the Ushanka, of course. And if you want to know more about the resulting project, you can visit the website we made. I will provide you a link at the end of the lecture. And we were actually not pleased with just having a website, so we thought we should also do a book for the release of the typeface. So the designer of the typeface redesigned a new alphabet book. In German, it goes from A like apple to B like ball to all the alphabet in a very friendly way. We also have this project of doing emojis. And possibly my most favorite project that is connected to the release of this typeface is we had the idea of doing actually like a children's toy. So we found a company in Slovakia and that was really eager to work with us, and we sent them like templates of what we wanted to do and sent them everything to get it produced. And this is how they're producing it, still like a couple of years ago. And this is how the finished typeface looks. It comes in a box, it's called Lilu. And these are all the components. And of course already people are using it and posting stuff on Instagram. You can use it more or less mature. And finally I thought, now that we have everything, we should also do animations using the toy itself. It's probably my most favorite thing. And then we have also the bee. So the point with this is that now you saw all of this visual universe with the typeface being used in it. I hope that it gives the audience a better idea of what spirit the typeface has, what personality, what expression. We usually do that with every typeface, and they're all having a totally different visual universe. I have to go a bit in Bystra mode here. This is a typeface that is about cinema. So we wanted to connect it to cinematography. So we asked a filmmaker to make movies using the typeface or small clips. Typeface is called Cinetype. There's also a website for this project. I will provide you the link at the end of the lecture. Then there's this typeface that's about touching. I do not have time to go in details here. And then there's a typeface that is about the mix between the USA and Switzerland. I will also not get in details here. I will just show you one thing that I find really cute. So here we made a lot of illustrations that dealt with like American candy designed in a very, very Swiss way. And I thought I should also bring the Russia and America a bit together. I also wanted to design the Cyrillic version of that typeface. Please note how the mustache of the fish is bouncing. It's really important. Or maybe a new airline, who knows? Sorry. If you want to visit the website, you can have a look at it online. And now this guy, of course, I hope you all know. This is a project I'm very happy to talk about because it has to do with Russia. And it has also to do with my own relation to Russia. Since I came here to this country the first time from maybe 7 years ago, there's never been a year that I haven't visited Russia. And I got really into this country. I had a very, very strong fascination and still have that fascination. I also have friends of mine visiting me in Switzerland. I've also spent New Year in Belarus with Tulum of Sasha and the Kepka. And I also at one point decided to study Russian literature and language at the University of Zurich with my teacher Olga. This was at university the day of Russian Culture Day. And to really embarrass myself, I will show you some of my homework I did for Olga. And I want to really mention that I was a shitty student, really, really bad. But I always drew really nice drawings. And Olga told me, Noel, you know, I cannot give you any errors on your homework because you're an artist. So, so we are here, a letter I wrote to Nikolai Valuyev. This is my Cyrillic handwriting. Here I'm describing my own vacations to Russia and to Belarus. And the thing is, when I studied Russian, I was already a trained graphic designer, and I did it more out of passion and maybe because I had too much time and energy. And while I was at university, I couldn't help myself to look at also this study from the point of view of a designer, and this was the language book we've used. Now, I'm showing this piece of design. Please remember this. This is one of the most awful pieces of design I ever saw. This is horrible. This is horrendous. And I had to use this to study Russian, and I will explain for two reasons why I really hate it. First of all, if you look at it from a typographer's point of view, it's like there's here this blurry scribble, and here a box, and then there's here this symbol, and here there's a letter, and then here's a half circle with some stroke, and it's a total chaos. No one understands who made that design. It's really hard to understand the structure of the page, the hierarchy, what is how important. That's one thing that's really bad, just the technical point of view. And the second thing is, what language is this book teaching? Because for me, this could be Spanish as well, right? Those people could be Spanish. It doesn't communicate anything for me from Russian culture. It doesn't relate to that country. It's just a very generic layout that is not visualizing culture. And in order to learn a language, you also need to get in touch with the culture. You need also to get involved with the visual culture. So I thought to myself, I can do this much better, and I designed my own language book. That's just as a project. And the main inspiration I actually took was from this book here. And I found that during one of my trips in St. Petersburg in an antique bookstore. And if you look here at the layout, it's a very, very simple layout, but it also has a very pure language. It's very strict, it's very well ordered, and I feel also that the illustration style that's being used is really resembling the typography and the other layout elements on the page. So this is very calm, very easy to understand. And I found more examples from the Red Army book for the Kalashnikov. And it's not about really the content, it's more about what design language that is being used. And and from all of that inspiration, I made a project proposal of how I would design a book about the Russian language. It would have the same format, and because you're learning a language and that language uses not the Latin alphabet, of course you need to start with the alphabet. So I designed this. Please note that I printed 500 pieces of this poster and I didn't even get the title right. And this is basically my proposal for a more contemporary version of the Russian alphabet, because it also includes some figure of more contemporary history in Russia, like those two things. And of course those two guys as well. And my idea was, how would a language book look like that would be very systematical and formally very clean? How would that work like? How would you teach someone that language? And I thought I would start with the alphabet and then also explain how to write actually the character in Cyrillic, and also communicate a piece of Russian culture. Like Ded Moroz, no one knows in Switzerland. And for example, this page would be about time. Please ignore all the content, it's just for the design. And I got really inspired by old Soviet school books. Here you can see the chapter about dressing. And of course that comes from the example I showed earlier. You have the chapter about describing things in a three-dimensional space in Russian. And I thought, okay, let's bring in constructivism, right? Like with very clear geometric shapes, because you are all lucky that you don't have to learn this language, because it's really, 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 really difficult, crazy difficult, especially the grammar. And it's a bit the same for me, that typography and layout and design is always connected to one respective culture. And do we have time? 10 minutes, okay. So the last project is kind of the fun project. Because it's a project that I've been tasked to design a poster for a Swiss poster festival. Now, this might not sound too complicated for you, but to design a poster for a festival about the poster is really, really difficult, because it's a design that references itself. And when I was tasked to design this poster for a poster festival, I had a look at all the posters that were designed previously. And every time a different designer gets picked to design this poster. So every year is a different designer. And what I noticed is that in a way, every designer had a look on what happened previously and tried to fit his design in the succession of those other designs. Because for me, they all resemble one another. They're all from different designers, but to me, they are all having a bit the same attitude and the same language. And I thought, okay, Noel, like your goal is now to not do that again. So how to do that? How to break out of that context? And I thought, okay, let's travel to a really crazy country. And that was actually the first time where I traveled to Japan. Now, I want to tell you a bit about the story of me traveling to Japan to get inspiration to do that poster. It's a story of drama here. There's a lot of cuteness involved. Love, lot of love, more cuteness and love, and of course my happy spot. And I was really extensively traveling around and trying to participate as much as I can in Japanese culture. Of course, this you might be familiar with. I also went to Korea to attend some really cool parties. And what was really astonishing for me was the whole visual universe in East Asia. Even at the night, everything is very colorful and blinking, and I guess it's the impression a lot of foreigners get when they're there the first time. It's visually really stimulating. And I wanted to try out really everything, so I also spent a considerable amount of time playing video games in some basement with Korean kids. Until they even asked me and my friend to join their game clan. It's like Hyper Clan Korea. Yeah. And they have also sunglasses for dogs. Severe punishment of imprisonment for 5 years if you're riding your bicycle drunk. Please do not do that while in Japan. Then there's all of this stuff. Plastic food, cool real-life characters, cars that look like those characters. Yeah, this chocolate packaging, this will come later again. This is an earthquake road something. Yeah, this is, yeah, I asked some Korean friends, but they wouldn't explain what the hell this is. Yeah, I think it's an advertisement in a just regular subway about a guy that has problem with his digestion. It gets worse and worse. And to go a bit back on topic, this is not East Asia, this is Switzerland. And this is a traffic sign in Switzerland to tell you that there's a construction site ahead. And the emotional reaction you usually have if you see one of those is like, oh no, there's going to be traffic jam, and you're annoyed. And if you look at the visual communication of this symbol, it's very aggressive. The triangular shape is chosen, so it's more aggressive than just a rectangular shape. Because it's very pointy, and then the red border signals danger. And then the illustration in the middle is just a construction site worker in a very, very minimal way. This is very Swiss, very, very Swiss design. And I'm not so particularly proud of it, because if you look at the equivalent of how this would look in Japan, the Japanese one looks like about 10 times more awesome. Looks like this. So, if you have the same thing in Japan, the construction site worker is super sorry that you have to wait. He's personally apologizing. And he even brought his small little dog to work, which is cool. And even the dog is kind of apologetic. So, everyone is super sorry. And I thought like, wow. This is so much nicer. If I see that, how can I possibly get annoyed? And if you look at the bigger picture, this is a construction site, how it would look in Switzerland. And it looks awful. I mean, it's basically prison bars on the road, right? Like, the communication of this thing is, we need to keep people out, so let's build prison bars, so no one will enter this area because it's a construction site. And it's again, in this very Swiss mentality, let's make it clear no one can enter here. Let's put a prison bar, let's put something heavy. It needs to be of steel, it needs to be aggressive, it needs to be strict. And And this is the most amazing thing, how the same thing would look in Japan. It's like this. And this is representing so much of a different attitude. How can you be angry at the monkeys that... And I noticed that when I was walking around in the road, and I actually started a collection because, mind you, there's not only monkeys, there's also bunnies, there is giraffes, there is dolphins, there is frogs, there is whatever this is, there's ducklings, and this is my latest edition. This is from this year, I think, the panda bear. And then there's my personal favorite, of course, the raccoon. Although my Japanese friends told me it's a tiger. And all of this had, the story was, I was traveling around in Japan, I had to do this poster, I said, okay, let's go on an inspiration trip. I did all of that, and then the guy that actually commissioned me to do the poster called me and said, Noel, we need the poster. And I was like, oh yeah, that's right, I should actually, instead of playing video games, take care of that. And at the time, I was visiting a Japanese volcano, and because I was too stupid to read the warning signs, it actually said extreme danger. So the volcano is still active, so it constantly fumes with poisonous gas that is unhealthy to you. And I didn't read that warning. So I went up that volcano anyway. And on top, it looked about like this. No, this is not an advertisement for Ray-Ban sunglasses. This is a holiday picture. And the white stuff in the back is not fog, that's gas. And I was super drugged by this gas and stressed because I had to come up with an idea for the poster. So I got back to the topic of what should I do to not fall in the same thing as everything before. And I thought you should do something that has nothing to do with this attitude of Swiss graphic design, of conceptually and directly communicate. And I thought if those posters kind of resemble this, you know, this Swiss way of design, let's do a poster that resembles this kind of design. And yeah, I think I have to speed up. So here is the result. It's a poster for the Weltformat Poster Festival. So it's Welt, Form, Art, Poster. And we have a black and white version, and we also have an animated version. And it's the maximum of cuteness I could come up with for design. And to conclude this lecture, I have Instagram, I also have Twitter and Facebook, and if you want to, you can take a picture of this page here, so you can remember all the links if you want to follow up anything. And I think that's almost it. I have a little gift. Because they had to wait so long.
Okay, thank you, Noel. Let's applause. I believe there couldn't be a better lecture for Friday night than this one. Thank you.
But I think because it's really cold.
We have to laugh, yeah.
No, I think we should also end this on a serious note. So I have for you a poem. But I'm gonna embarrass myself a lot now. And maybe because it's been really cold, we can all stand up for a moment and listen to me. Oh, I hope I can make this. Okay. Люблю тебя, Петра, творение. Люблю твой стройный вид, Невы державное течение, береговой ее гранит, твоих оград узор чугунный, твоих задумничих ночей. Прозрачный сумрак, безлунный, когда я в комнате моей. Пишу, читаю без лампады, я ясный спящий громады. Пустынник улиц и светла, адмиралтейская игла. Thank you.
Обычно у нас наступает сессия вопросов-ответов, но я думаю, мы не нужно ничего спрашивать. Давайте просто пообщаемся с Ноэлем и разойдемся в бар. Спасибо.
Спасибо большое.